Hello, my friends. Today I want to talk about trust in a parent-teen relationship. I've talked about trust in general in my group this week. I've done some posts about it, so you can check those out if you haven't seen them all. But I want to talk about how it is different when you are parenting a teenager. So first I want to start with a quote from Stephen M. R. Covey. He says, "Trust is one of the most powerful forms of motivation and inspiration. People want to be trusted. They respond to trust. They thrive on trust." Trust is one of the things that holds relationships together. It can cement it. When we feel like someone truly trusts us, we want to trust them. We feel like we can be more honest. We can be more vulnerable. We can share things with them that we wouldn't share with other people. So, unfortunately, it's a little hard to trust our teens, and there are circumstances in which we should not trust our teens. One of our jobs as parents is to protect our teens and to keep them from really damaging themselves, right? Or from just really messing up their futures. So how does that relate with trust? So first, I want us to kind of talk about and remember, and this is so hard for me to remember, is that one of the main ways that teens learn is through making mistakes. It's one of the ways that all of us learn. And we don't want our teens to make mistakes, right? We want our teens to learn from our experiences. We want them to be safe. We want them to be healthy and happy. And sometimes we step in and we try to manipulate the circumstances in their life so that they don't make a mistake. And then when they do make a mistake, it turns into a trust issue. So I want you to first just kind of think about that a little bit. Think about whether or not you allow your teen to make mistakes. And then when they do make a mistake, how does that impact your relationship with them? How does it impact their identity? Do they feel like they're a screw up, that they can't do anything right, that they have to be perfect to be loved? Because those thoughts can be really damaging to a teenager. Second, now I want to talk about how to handle it when your teen breaks your trust. This is inevitable. It is going to happen because A, they're not perfect. B, they're teenagers. They are not totally developed. Their brains and the logical side of their brain don't develop before until they're in their 20s. And so they're going to mess up. They're going to make mistakes. How does that impact trust? So if you come into a situation where your teen has broken your trust, whether that is breaking a rule or maybe you find out something that you didn't know before. So let's say it's something big, like your teen was doing drugs and you didn't know about it, or they have been having unprotected sex with their boyfriend or their girlfriend, or something big. That can really damage trust in a relationship. Sometimes, though, we allow little things to do more damage to trust than is maybe necessary. Maybe your teen, you find out they have a secret Instagram account that you didn't know about, or something like that. So the way we handle these different situations should be different. We're going to talk about why they're not here in a little bit. So here is what to do when you find out your teen has done something wrong. So first is to not take it personally. This one's a little bit obvious, but really hard to do. Teens, like I said, they're going to mess up, and it's more about them than it is about you. The second is to resolve your emotions first. This is always the number one thing to do. When we are feeling hurt, when we are feeling disappointed, when we are feeling afraid, it's easy to come down too hard on our teens, and that can damage their trust in us. If they don't believe that what they've shared is confidential or that we're going to come down really hard on them, they're going to be more likely to hide things and to not be honest with us. The third, I often forget this one, is to have your teen reflect on what happened. Sometimes it's helpful to, I just read this, to have them write it down. What exactly happened? What are the facts of the situation? Help them kind of remove some of the subjective stuff from that and their feelings about it. What really happened? Because sometimes we think we know the whole story. We find something on a social media feed. We overhear a conversation with their teen. We see something they text their friends, which sometimes they kind of brag a little bit. Sometimes that's not accurate. And we jump to conclusions. So if you can have your teen, take some space, resolve your emotions, have your teen write down exactly what they think happened, and then you can both discuss it more logically without all of those emotions getting in the way. And then listen. I am terrible at this. I sometimes feel like I'm a total hypocrite in this group because I don't do all the things I tell you guys to do. Just yesterday, I totally went into lecture mode and talked to my teen and didn't listen to anything she said. So listen, and maybe the quote unquote breaking of your trust was not as bad as you think it was. And then finally, give the consequence. Now, tie it to the actual behavior of what your teen did instead of trust. Trust is very, very complicated. And you can certainly teach your teen about it and mentor them about what trust is and what it means. But if we use the phrase, earn my trust, too often, teens don't understand what it means, and they don't understand how they can earn it back. They don't understand what consequences are tied to it. So basically, when we set boundaries and they're crossed, it can feel very painful and it can be damaging. But don't overcompensate. So this is really important. When our trust gets broken, sometimes we get really paranoid and we move into paranoid parent mode. We are searching their rooms. We're digging through their texts. We're looking at their Instagram feeds, over and above and beyond just because of one piece of information that we have. When trust is complicated and it's an entire relationship with your teen. And so when they do one thing, that doesn't change who your teen is. It doesn't change who you are. And it doesn't impact a relationship as much as you think it does. Relationships are long and they're, like I said, they're complicated. They can come back from a lot of breaches of trust, right? We can choose to trust again. Other things that we can do as parents. So number one is to teach our teens to become trustworthy. So I talked about this a little bit in the group. There's a difference between someone's trust, which is really on the other person's, their choice, versus becoming trustworthy. So if you can tie some of the things that your teen does to becoming trustworthy and what that means, it stays more inside of your teen's control and it's easier for them to comprehend. So for example, hey, you did the dishes when I asked you to. That's really becoming more trustworthy. Or when you are honest with me, teenager, then you become more trustworthy. You become more dependable. Use words like dependable or responsible and actual things your teen can do. Number two, this is tricky. So don't manipulate trust to control your teenager's reactions. So hard because it comes down to motivation. So we do want to teach our teens. We want to teach them to be trustworthy. But I was thinking the other day about teaching babies to walk or to crawl. I have this cute video of me when my youngest was a baby and she was learning to crawl and I had this toy and I kept moving the toy backwards and taking a step and she would crawl and she was kind of fussing and I was like, I know I'm so mean, and I just kept moving in order to teach her to crawl. So this can be something that we can use as parents, but I would recommend not using this as trust. Trust cannot be something that you just keep moving and manipulating in order to get your teen to take certain actions. Because they will, going back to that first quote that people want to be trusted, if you cannot trust them, they will feel like they aren't trustworthy. They will feel like they can't do things. Their self-esteem can take a hit. They won't feel competent. They want to be trusted. And if you keep saying, well, I'll trust you when this happens, I'll trust you when this happens, I'll trust you when this happens, and you keep moving that toy backwards, you keep moving that trust, it can damage your relationship with your teenager. So another thing is to examine your own beliefs about trust. I also did a post about this. This will really impact whether or not you trust your teen. Do you think teens in general are trustworthy? Were you trustworthy as a teenager? What stories do you read in the media? Do you have a hard time trusting people? Do you feel like you're too naive? Do you feel like your teen is just constantly lying to you? I read an interesting article about how bad moms actually are about figuring out if their teens are lying. We do an okay job if our teen is actually lying, but we do a really bad job predicting whether or not they're telling the truth. So basically, we overestimate how often they're lying to us. So that can make it hard to create trust in a relationship. Number 4, think through what you think will happen if your teen breaks your trust. Are you telling stories about the future that might not be true? 6, decide which responsibilities, which cannot. So which things as a parent of a teenager are you going to absolutely just not ever allow? It's not earnable. It doesn't matter how quote unquote trustworthy your teen is. For example, you may, when they're living in your home, never allow open internet. So maybe as long as they're living in your house, they have to be on your Disney Circle, or they have to have some level, even if it's minimal, some level of control. Or is that something they can earn? Can they earn the right to download an app without your permission? Can they earn the right to have a social media account? And then what would the rules be about that? So what things are actually earnable, if that makes sense, and what things are just off the table? There are things that you're never going to allow as a parent because your teen's safety is your number one priority. Another thing is to establish some check-in routines. So this will help your teen feel like you are not micromanaging them. They do not like to be micromanaged. So if you can create some routines that I check in when you're on a date, I check in when you get home, there's curfews, I'm going to ask you about XYZ. These are pieces of information I expect you to share with me to have a trusting relationship. And these are the types of information that you can keep private. We're going to talk about that in a second. So now, I want to talk about privacy for just a minute before we end. So privacy is very closely related to trust. And I didn't even make this connection until I was studying and reading some articles to prepare this Facebook Live. So what things do you believe can be private in a parent and teen relationship? Because that privacy can be a breach of trust one way or the other. So if your teen feels like something should be private and you break into it or look at it or snoop through it, that's going to break your teen's trust in you. And if your teen is keeping things private that you feel like they should tell you, right? Then you're going to have a hard time trusting them. So privacy is a big issue, and it is really challenging, largely because of safety. So here are just some things that you might want to consider. These are some ways that you can honor your teen's privacy. You do not have to do all of these. This can be something that you discuss with your spouse and with your teen, but here's just some ideas. 1 is to always knock before entering their bedroom. 2, ask before looking in their school bag. 3, let them know what the rules are about phones and privacy. So we just talked about that a little bit. What are your rules and why? Number 4, don't listen in on their phone conversations. Number 5, don't constantly call and text them. Number 6, don't read their diary or journal or anything personal like that without their permission. This gets tricky with tech. You'll want to have a specific conversation about that. Is an email private, but a text isn't, if you're paying for the phone, that gets a little sticky, but you can decide that. Number 7 is to allow your teen to keep some things private. What things do you need to know as a parent, particularly things about safety, and what things are they allowed to do on their own? They have to differentiate, they have to become independent and develop their own identity, and they're going to need to separate from us in order to be able to do that. Give them some time alone. Respect the privacy of their room. You can also determine what that means as a family. Finally, don't post pictures or information of them without their permission. You might notice I don't talk about my own teen a lot. Sometimes I do in the comment section. You would like, but I kind of check with them first. We moms do need to vent, but because this is kind of more public and there's a lot of people in the group, I am a little bit careful sometimes about what I post about my teens. But I discuss it with them, and they're cool with what I share. So when should you invade your teen's privacy? So number 1, if your teen is not handling their responsibilities. So if they have broken trust over and over and over again, and your mom gut is screaming at you and you feel like something is wrong, it is okay to invade their privacy a little bit. Now, the first way to do that is not to necessarily snoop through their stuff. That's kind of the first thing that we want to do as a parent. Try talking to them first and express some of your concerns. Unless you've already decided, things aren't private, then it's okay to look through them. And 2, you find red flags that need investigating. So let's say you do weekly spot checks on their phone or whatever, and you find some things that are concerning. It is okay to investigate those things. We do need to keep our teens safe, and we need to know what things to talk to them about and what things to teach them about. 3, you notice big changes in your teen's behavior or moods. So this could be depression, it could be anxiety, suicidal thoughts, like any sort of big changes are worth it. Number 5, you see bruises or cuts or other marks on their body. Number 6, this kind of sums it up or whatever, you are concerned about your teen's safety. So especially their physical safety, but also kind of their emotional, social safety, with bullying and things like that. This is one of our jobs as parents. So that's just kind of coming to the end here, is basically to, we really need to teach our teens, A, what trust means, B, what it means to be trustworthy, C, what it means to keep things private, and how is that going to relate to your relationship with your teen. We want them to also trust us. It's not just about whether or not we trust our teens, but are we trustworthy? Do we show up when we're supposed to pick them up? Do we remember to drop them off? Do we have, whatever these contractual things, kind of have with your teen? Are you dependable and reliable? Do they know that when they share things with you, it's going to be private unless in certain circumstances or whatever? So I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the group.